1/3 of small business owners in the USA are mothers. How did the tech revolution enable this outstanding number? This week, I have Devanshi, three-time founder with a previous exit at a nine-figure valuation and the current founder of Motif Skincare, a scientific sensorial skincare company. We'll get to what that means later. And of course, she is also a mom. I cannot wait for this conversation. But first, welcome to this week's episode of Make Sense, a video podcast that simplifies complex issues at the intersection of tech and people. So whether you're totally hyped on artificial intelligence and ready for that robot takeover, or you want to crawl into a cave after deleting all of your social media accounts, I don't blame you. I am here with my guest to help make sense of what's going on so you can design yourself, you can make choices about your future. My name is Lindsay. I am a product market fit strategist and innovation advisor. I have always been obsessed with how we can better design technology to support humanity. So let's get started. Devanshi, welcome. How are you?
I am great. I'm so excited to be here today with you.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. Happy to have you. Happy to get into the skincare, but also talk about mompreneurship. So we'll get started with our regular first segment, Crystal Ball. What does the future hold for people new to Make Sense? This is where I kind of toss out some trends for 2023 and beyond. And my guests give us their hot take on whether it's happening or it's not happening and whether they'd like it to happen or not. So we'll see. All right. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Awesome. So let's start with an easy one. It's one that I have brought up with a few e-commerce experts that have been on the show. So secondhand fashion. Old clothes are a big business, particularly with brands starting to own more of the resale of their clothes. What do you think?
I think it's already happening, and I'd love to see it happen.
Okay. Do you buy secondhand at all?
I do. I buy a lot of secondhand designer clothes for my kids.
That's awesome.
I feel like it's always in good condition. And I kind of like that something was in a home instead of a factory. So we always wash clothes before. So I love getting secondhand kids' clothes and secondhand accessories for myself. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That is great. I am a big fan of secondhand as well, vintage or passed down from my grandparents. And I mentioned this before, but I've seen in, REI in them doing consignment sales of products that their customers have brought back in. So I hope to see more brands owning kind of that resale channel for sure.
When I worked as an innovation advisor as well, in the boardrooms of a lot of brands, as well as diamond retailers, this is a conversation that is ongoing.
Wow. So we had Christy Cullinane. She is the founder of Plum Diamonds on, and they're lab grown diamonds, which was a totally awesome conversation too. Just, kind of even more resegmenting these different audiences in the existing market to find opportunities for reuse, recycle, all of the R's.
Love it. Yeah.
All right, so this one's a little weird. I don't know if I brought this one up. Maybe you're the first one. Wearing mushrooms and seaweed. Designers and manufacturers are turning to plant-based solutions. It looks like you know something. Tell us more.
Yes, I do. So I think, again, this is already happening. I was traveling last month. My husband and I did a quick trip to Lake Como in Italy.
Beautiful.
And at the gift store, this person told me, I was looking at this top and it felt really soft. And she's like, it's made of milk.
Milk?
I was like, okay, yes. And then there were these pans and they were made of seaweed and they were beautiful. I wasn't able to get them in time, but it's on my list of things to reach back out to the hotel to see if they can send them to me. It was 75% seaweed.
Wow.
So I love the trend. I don't know how I feel about using food sources for a lot of, so it's sustainable in one way, but another way makes me think like, are we borrowing from food sources when we still have like world poverty? So yeah, but it is
Yeah,
happening.
that is an interesting way to look at like how does this impact the system? Because it's never
Yeah.
just, one thing in isolation. And I really can't say anything to mushrooms and seaweed, although one of the coolest businesses I had ever heard about in New York was a company that was getting paid by coffee shops to come pick up their coffee grounds and then using
Mhm.
those coffee grounds to grow mushrooms and selling those mushrooms to Whole Foods, which I thought was amazing because they're making money on both sides
Yeah.
of their
Yeah.
operation. So, if mushrooms are super easy to grow too, maybe it's possible. I think I also like the idea of potentially the fabric being closer to where it's being manufactured versus,
Yeah.
shipping fabric all around the world. So, all
I
right,
agree.
here's one in your wheelhouse, or maybe no tox tweakments. So, non-invasive treatments such as LED facials and skin rejuvenations will help consumers replicate the effects of a cosmetic procedure without the cost, pain, or downtime.
Again, I think this is happening. I speak slowly because I'm wary of replicating procedures that are done with professionals in professional settings at home. And I don't always believe in this democratization of complex skincare, which should be handled by experts. However, I do love, like, I've been reading more and more about red light therapy and things like that that get you close to professional type of results. But yeah, so where I think in some cases I think it's great. In others, I'm wary. I'll give you an example of times when I'm wary is chemical peels. I think the
Yeah,
more and more we're doing chemical peels at home, we're potentially harming our skin long term.
got it. Okay, so there's potential for the at-home DIYer to maybe take things
Yeah,
too far and injure themselves. There's potential for maybe kind of disappointment if you expect to replicate, as this headline said, to really replicate the effects of a cosmetic procedure. Sure, if you actually get an eye lift versus, using creams and such, you can't expect to have the same exact results.
results.
So it's making sure the DIYer understands what it is that they can expect and they don't hurt themselves in the process. Which is that what
Agreed.
you're going with?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
I will say I have this device. I don't remember the name of it, and they're not paying me for ads. So in this podcast, but it's a at home like laser hair removal, and
Mm-hmm.
I still can't get out of my head. I've used it to some success, but I just don't know like the effects. I'm sure it's FDA approved, but there's still maybe from the 90s the like, is my cell phone emitting radio frequencies into my brain kind of. I know it's crazy that I think these things, but I do have those concerns. Like, am I putting the lasers too close to my chest or too close
Yeah.
to my organs?
There's also the psychology of this. Like, I don't want the pressure of having to do everything myself. I
Hmm.
also want to go somewhere and have someone take care of me. So
Right.
I also think that the psychology of this is in enabling people to do things at home, we're creating pressure for them to do more at home. And so I think that's another perspective.
Yeah, right, right. It's one thing to do your own nails, right? It's another to,
Yeah.
like permanently remove your underarm hair.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
do like the idea of this should be self-care, not pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Agreed.
so quick question. Motif is a scientific sensorial skincare company. Make
Yes.
it make sense. What do you mean by scientific sensorial?
Sure. So I had, I was a skincare junkie when I was in my 20s. I tried all these different products. And the more I spent, I thought I'd see more results, but I didn't. In fact, I gave myself rosacea. And so I turned to scientific skincare, which was skincare my derm recommended. And, very basic things like CeraVe and Cetaphil. And like I had to heal my skin again. But as soon as my skin would feel like it was better, I would want to go back to use like a beautiful consumer focused brand and buy into that story. And so I started looking at the industry, and I started looking at a very, saturated industry. And there seemed to be two really distinct segments. Like you had these, esthetician, dermatology, science brands. And then you had these brands that you could buy over the counter, like Sephora or, all these different beauty retailers. And there was a big gap between efficacy, but also storytelling. And I realized as consumers, you want both. So sure, when you have a burning skincare problem, you'll go to a derm, but you don't want to stick to that skincare forever. You want something in your vanity, in your bathroom that you feel like you're a part of, that you look forward to using. And as we know in skincare, consistency is what leads to results. So you have to draw people in so that they consistently use them. And that's where we focused on the sensorial aspect of building our brand. So the science in terms of the results and the clinically backed ingredients in clinically backed quantities, but also creating like beautiful packaging, a scent, luxurious textures, that and a brand that has a point of view that makes people want to be a part of it for a longer duration of time.
It's really, really interesting. Tell me more about, you had a tech exit, you've been an innovation advisor. How did you get into skincare and, a physical product?
Yeah, so I mean, from all your tech expertise that creating a digital product and a physical product is completely different. I went in thinking I would want to be very, very agile. And I think I really did as far as I could, but there are limitations with a physical product. But let me take it back a step and answer your original question. I was in tech. I love tech. I love the fact that you can be creative as well as analytical and technical. So real left brain, right brain space.
Exactly.
Right. And we, so and from tech, because I was always involved in strategy and tech. So I moved into innovation, really helping a lot of Fortune 100s in beauty and food, help them innovate.
So you got
And
into
that's when
packaged goods.
yes, yes. And that's when I realized, though, the disconnect. Tech moves so quickly. There's so much data, there's so much analysis. You go from idea to execution so quickly, and you change that execution again the next day. There's so much learning happening constantly with every iteration. And on the other hand, you have physical goods where you think of a concept and you work towards getting it into place 2 years later, where when the market has changed and everything in the world has changed in 2 years, right? So I started seeing these like long R&D cycles, this absence of feedback loops, and just, I would always say disruption and innovation happens at the edges, right? It's when someone from a different industry comes to another industry and says, well, why do you do things this way?
Yeah, 100%.
And so right? And so I think I was that beauty outsider saying, well, why are you doing things this way? And like, why aren't you speaking to somebody? Why aren't you gathering data? Why aren't you launching faster? Why are you using libraries and benchmarks of products that are out there today, which means that they're already outdated?
Right. Yeah.
And so that was the initial part. And, I was pregnant, dealing with my skin, and I had this like rosacea story where I was using like CeraVe all day. And I wanted to use like potent skincare, but I didn't want skin irritation and redness.
Right.
And so I was caught up in this like this consumer dissatisfaction. And then the third, I guess the final part of that perfect storm was meeting my dermatologist, who's an investor and an advisor in the company. So that's
awesome.
how I got here.
Yeah, you're making me remember that I need to do my yearly dermatology check. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Don't forget, everyone listening, you should check out your skin, getting old
100%.
with the little sunspots and stuff like that. So definitely need to check this out. So going into our second segment, maybe third, because I inserted that quick question. What do you know? So this is where us relatively intelligent tech ecosystem insiders discuss, what has made national news. We don't claim to be experts, but we may know more than you do. We've talked about on Make Sense about Silicon Valley Bank. I think it's back in the news because they're begging for a bailout in DC. Mompreneurs on Etsy were affected in an interesting way. They said they couldn't pay the mortgage or feed their kids because the payments started to fail to
Wow.
arrive because Etsy was using Silicon Valley Bank and they were using Silicon Valley Bank to process sales. So the fallout actually did hit some ordinary families. I know you said, before we hopped on that you weren't using SVB, but I'm wondering, what you've observed over the past few months, particularly about how mompreneurs are handling not just the fallout from SVB, but also from just, a harder economic time with all the
Yeah.
speculation.
Yeah, I do have a lot of friends, moms and just other female founder friends who had startups that were backed by SBV, and it was a difficult time. They try to turn to their audience, and yeah, it's even with the Etsy story. It's really difficult when we create unsustainable banking systems, and who creates them and who suffers because of them. I think that's the irony in the current economic climate. I have had some friends raise. It has definitely been difficult. I mean, it's historically been difficult for women to raise money,
Right.
and the current economic climate definitely makes it harder. Sometimes it makes me also think that it creates space for, it might be a correction to this concept of blitz scaling, right?
Hmm.
Where we can go back to the basics and create businesses that grow slowly, and that's okay.
Right.
We don't have to constantly throw a lot of money at businesses and focus on the top line only. We can look at other markers for success,
Hmm.
impact and, customer retention and like bottom line and, the other unsexy stuff. So not to take away from people that were truly, affected, like some of the cases that you said, but I think sometimes some of these turns can affect the way we do business. But of course, I mean, access to capital is critical.
Yeah, I think to focus on mompreneurs, I opened this episode with the fact that 1/3 of
Yeah.
all small business owners are moms. Uh, Small businesses, over the years, when I started in tech in 2005, the word startup was used to just describe a high growth tech based, tech enabled business. Now it's being used more colloquially to describe any new business,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
And so, what I think is interesting is that within the context of Silicon Valley Bank, we spoke a lot about startups slash high growth new businesses, venture scalable. They're looking for 10x, 100x returns to be $100 million business. But when we look at entrepreneurs out there and small businesses, um, they don't have as much capital. It's much harder for them to get investment, and so SVB, we think of the tech startups. We're not thinking about the small businesses, the moms who have been enabled by these marketplaces to be able to be online. Um, so I think what I'm getting to, and maybe I'm rambling on a little, is that the tech revolution has helped more moms become business owners, but moms are still, and women at all, are still beholden to these drastic decisions, the, what did you call it, blitz growth of the
Yep.
startups.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think tech, yeah, the marketplaces like Etsy have, I don't know, like what is the percentage of mompreneurs in Etsy? Like,
Yeah,
I
I don't know.
wonder, like I
Yeah.
would be curious to know, but it enables you with very little capital, with very little infrastructure to get off the ground and start something. Like, let's say you've
Mhm.
had a career pause. Let's say you've been out of the workforce and you're coming back to something, or you've decided to step back from your career to, to spend more time momming and you
Mhm.
want to, have a side hustle that still supports the family. So yeah, I mean, tech has been instrumental in and we know even the pandemic has been instrumental in like creating a larger community of mompreneurs.
Yeah, yeah. Is there a reason you think that women gravitate to small businesses versus like high growth startups? You think it's the natural kind of balance of things?
No, I well, one is, I mean, I guess the answer to that I think is a lot more philosophical,
Okay.
because it's kind of like saying, well, why is there a gender gap?
Right.
Right. So I don't know if women, right? It's like, why do women, I think a lot of women are probably out there trying to raise money for high growth startups. And we know that they're underrepresented in who like capital is awarded to.
Uh-huh.
And I think in the absence of being able to do that, they do this,
Right. Right.
right? And I mean, for sure, in how, and that whole system supports that discrepancy, right? So if
Right.
you have that gender gap and you have in a conventional heterosexual couple, you have the guy out there earning more money, it makes more financial sense for the woman to take a career pause and spend more time with the kids, especially if they can't afford childcare. And then she
Mhm.
starts to do something on the side because she's still entrepreneurial. So you start to see that balance maintain itself and perpetuate itself. And I think
Mhm.
that's what you start seeing when you look at even high growth startups. And then I think there's a psychology to women, right? Like there's that famous study where they asked how many men they think could land a plane without any training. And a much, much, much higher percentage of men said that they think that they could
Wow.
versus women with
Wow.
no training. It just goes to like, again, that disparity leads to a disparity in self-confidence as well.
Mhm. Yeah, the biases are ingrained not just for, men, but for all of us about women's capabilities. So women project that as well, right? We've learned it. It's been part of
We
our
mirror we mirror it back, right? We've
right.
been mirroring it back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So you are an accomplished entrepreneur, serial founder. And I want to spend more time. I think in previous Make Sense episodes, I don't get to the entrepreneurial stuff until much, much later. I don't get to spend as
Mm-hmm.
much time with my guests talking about everything that they've done. But I want to spend more time with you on this to learn more about you. So in this segment, it's kind of kitschy. I call it "Who Needs a Safety Net?" Because being an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur takes a lot of risk and courage. In this segment, I am going to ask you to share stories that highlight your personal journey, and the kind of personal journey that entrepreneurship requires. Now, you gave me a great quote from Elizabeth Gilbert. Art is a crushing chore and a wonderful privilege. Why does that quote resonate with you?
Just a paradox of entrepreneurship. A, in a way, entrepreneurship at least to entrepreneurs and founders like myself, can be seen as an art. And it's something that we're kind of drawn to, knowing everything that's difficult about it. I mean, going from 0 to 1. I remember I was at a talk where this venture capital said, teams that go from 0 to 1 are the people with a machete in a jungle, just clearing the space and trying to, figure out
Was that
feasibility.
was that Jerry Colonna? Because he's my favorite and he's talked about that before.
Has
Uh,
he? Yeah, it
yeah,
might have been. And how the next team comes in, like, trims the hedges and makes a path and lays out the pebbles. And, I'm definitely the machete team.
yeah,
So, so it's hard, and you sign up for something hard. And it's the same thing with art. Like when you have, and, I do enjoy art as well. And so when you have this idea and you have to take it to fruition, it's a difficult process, and it's one that you're just drawn to. So it's kind of like a burden and a gift at the same time.
right, right. You can't sit still until you see this thing happen. And then I could
And
look.
you,
Yeah, so it feels like a responsibility. I definitely think in harder times in being self-employed now for 10 years, it's like when things get really, really hard, it can feel like a crushing chore. And you're like, why can't I just do something straightforward, right? Like,
yeah,
why
just like
can't
take a
I
paycheck
just
and like
take a
switch my phone off in
paycheck?
the weekend.
Do something straightforward. When I was younger, I used to think I'm going to go back to medical school. Like I didn't study anything in medical school
Well,
related, but I was always like jealous of, 4 or 5 years of med school and then a bunch of years of, being a resident and a fellow, and then you become a doctor. And it's like this straight shoot. But when you look at everything like a forest and you have a machete in your hand, it's like, how can I just walk up the trail that everyone else has been on when like it looks so much shorter to go this way, right? So,
yeah, because it's like you're that person who just like sees the light there and is drawn to it, right?
mhm.
And like, oh, like maybe there's like tigers there and snakes, but you're like, no, no, but I just want to check it out. Like there's that like curiosity. And
Yeah.
we know what it did to the cat. So
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah, persevere. I mean, every strength, like perseverance and resilience, has a weakness, right? We just want to see what's around the corner and we go a little too far. My mom always tells a story about how when my sister was a baby, she would crawl across the top of the stairs, look down, and then like keep crawling. And I would crawl across the stairs and I'd look and then I'd go tumbling, tumbling down. And it's like, that curiosity and that
yeah,
creativity and that need to solve a problem, or
yeah,
even if it's art or if it's a business, we can't let it go. And
exactly.
can become a chore, but it's also, when you have the opportunity to create something new, it can be an incredible privilege,
Yeah,
right?
but I do think that the industry can often like glorify it, and sometimes people go in for the wrong reasons. They don't understand fully the sacrifices and the difficulty in that process
Yeah, 100%. So I think the glorification is around the wonderful privilege, right?
at the end of it.
At the end of
Yeah,
it, but not the crushing chore. So, a
yeah,
lot of my friends look to me and see my freedom and flexibility to travel wherever I want, to take a random day off. And yeah, that is awesome. But, like not knowing where your next paycheck might come from,
yeah,
right? If you can pay your employees that month, that type of stuff it can feel crushing if you're not taking care of yourself, and
yeah, yeah.
maintaining that optimism. So how do you think
And
entrepreneurship, yeah, you go and then I'll
no, no,
ask you.
no, no, go ahead. No, no, please go ahead. Go
It's
ahead.
like,
Go ahead.
how do you think entrepreneurship has helped you see the world differently?
I enjoy spending time alone. a lot. I think as I've become an entrepreneur, I even enjoyed even more. When you're trying to do different and be different, it's important to be able to spend time with yourself to understand who you are, what you believe, what your impact has to be, and what your personal desire is to manifest outside of what everyone else is telling you to do. So, simplest example is I'm starting a skincare company. I decided to launch with a cleanser. Everybody told me nobody cares about a cleanser. Everybody told me not to start with a cleanser. Everybody told me, and so not to discount the advice and experience of others. But this is my point of view, and I have data to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to be able to sit with my thoughts to understand why. And so I think that relationship with yourself and your instinct and your intuition is really important. So going back to a cleanser, it is an afterthought, but it's a huge market. And it's a rinse off, which is the lowest dollar per ounce. But the highest category that people spend on is a mask, which is also rinse off, mm-hmm. which is the highest dollar per ounce we spend on any product. So there's an opportunity there to combine the two, especially for people that don't have time to mask for 20 minutes. Can you get mask benefits in a cleanser, which is also a rinse off? So, there's always someone there to challenge the way things are, but it's always hard to go against a majority, which is why it's important for people that have a vision and are visionaries to be able to know how to spend time and to listen to yourself.
The things that I had in mind while you were talking is that I in my mind in my 20s, I was like, I wanted to be in that fast-paced startup environment. I wanted to be on. I'm really good at being a pinch hitter and like switching lanes really quickly, just to get stuff done. And the last full-time job I had, we were in an open floor plan and mm-hmm. literally on top of each other at these small desks. And I just felt like I was getting like claustrophobic all the time and I burnt out. Subsequently, I learned that I have ADHD, which, I did not know until I was 32, 33. And that I redid my Myers-Briggs with mm-hmm. someone that is actually trained in doing the assessment. Am totally a different letter combination than I had always thought, because I was answering the questions with how I thought I wanted or where I wanted to be versus who I actually am. And come to find out that ENTP, which is, I live in the world of ideas, that NT needs like 70% of their time by themselves. And I don't think I would have ever guessed that 10 years later, I would be so happy working creatively alone and having a certain percentage of time to collaborate with others. I love this. I love talking. I love the exchange. But man, I did not know when I was younger, I needed much more time to think and process on my own. And for sure, when you are doing something like starting your own business, you are always going to be a little bit scared of something. And that's great, because that's where growth happens. When you're a little bit scared, that's where growth happens. And so entrepreneurship, there's always some uncertainty. There's always some, thing to be scared of, which means you're always going to have to face a fear and decide, am I knocking it down, or am I just going to get a job and try to play it safe? Right.
Yeah.
And that is really the journey of learning about yourself and starting to get very comfortable being alone with yourself too. Do you have any, when you explain it to others, because I'm sure there are so many women, men, and anyone in between that are attracted to you because you've had so much success. How do you frame it when you talk to them about, the fear and, growing past that?
People like to talk about confidence, right? And what I think confidence is every time you feel fear and you get to the other side, you gain, like if you think about a video game, like the Nintendo comment, like you get a point.
Bing, bing. Yeah.
And so you have to spend, the more time you do that is like you look at the stairs and you like go down the stairs safely. That's every time you get a point of confidence. And so, again, it's different to like self-worth and believing in yourself. But, real confidence is when you get to the other side, and real growth is when you get to the other side of fear. I think another thing that helps to tell people is when you talk about just doing it, right? And in tech, it takes the pressure off when you say, you know what, just do it. We can fix it later. Where it's like done is better than perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just ship it, right? And so that's a big learning that I've had, and often where I find that people get stuck. So when they talk to me and they have all these great ideas, just start, just write that first word, just block the domain, just get in touch with someone, just start, because then there's a level of like momentum that you can count upon. But there's such a huge gap between idea and execution for most people. And that's where the fear and like the procrastination and the anticipation is. And that's where I find a lot of people get stuck. And, growing up, I was like I was a straight A student, and I grew up like, so my educational training was around building me up to be an individual contributor and like a top employee.
Mm-hmm.
It's my work experience training that built me to be a leader, an entrepreneur, and someone who, empowers other people, understands yourself, understands where your strengths and weaknesses are, where you build a team around you, where again, you know that you'll go further if you have a big and good and empowered team around you. But my educational background didn't set me up for that.
Right, right. So speaking of confidence, my final question for you, I'm going to make it a little personal.
Sure. Go for it.
So what advice do you have for women like me that are already entrepreneurs, but can't figure out how to bring a child into this lifestyle? I feel like I know a lot of moms that start a business after their first kid because they need that flexibility and freedom, but they're already, with a child. But then there's some of us that started this stuff on our own before kids. And it's like, how can because I would want to give a child the type of attention that I give my business, but my business is also a child as well.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if that question is different. I think that's a core fundamental question is, are you ready? And usually the answer people have superficially is always no. And deep inside, it may or may not be, right? But, it's kind of saying like, I'm busy. Like, yes, everyone's busy. But like what's inside and what is important, we will always make time for. So it's a huge commitment. I don't think everyone is ready for it. I don't think everyone will ever be ready for it. But it's also one of those things where there's so much fear between idea and execution. And sometimes if it's something you want, the best idea is to just jump.
Okay. Well,
or to understand if, you're like, okay, you know what? I envision like, that's not a part of the way I see my life and my future. And then that's great too. And if there's like an uncertainty and also like a not yet, there's also so many like, we should freeze your eggs. Like there's so many other, options. But I've seen with so many friends of mine that they keep thinking that they don't have the space when they want it inside. And there's a lot of like dissonance around that. And there's also a lot of fear about like the kind of parent you'll be. And my answer to them is, if you want it, just jump.
And it's the same advice for business, like take that first.
I think so.
Take that first step. There's never going to be the right, perfect time, and I think, Keep going.
The service that I do to other friends who want to be moms is I don't sugarcoat it.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with entrepreneurship is not to sugarcoat it, so that people are going in like knowing it's going to be, you know, a crushing chore and a wonderful privilege.
I love that. And that is a great way to wrap up this episode. The crushing chore, a wonderful privilege. The gap between having an idea and executing is usually fear. And the only way to get past that is taking that first step. Taking that first step gives you 1 point in the game of confidence. And the next step will give you another and another. And then you'll find yourself here, like Devanshi, three different businesses, like me, 10 years now. Like, how could I go back to a different life? So just like having children, for any moms out there, you know, if you want to have a business, just take that first step. And for any women like me that already have a business and you're like, how can I do this? It's jump. And I think that is wonderful that you do not sugarcoat it, because and I said this once about traveling, is that, you know, I don't want other women to see me like go travel India by myself and think that like they should do it too, if like they, without knowing what that actually entails. Yeah. So thank you for listening to Make Sense with me, your host, Lindsay Tavis, and guest Devanshi, founder of Motif Skincare. We hope you enjoyed our take on mompreneurs moving into from tech into skincare. I will tell you also, I love the encouragement of like, hey, if you're an outsider, you have something to offer in an industry you're not yet experienced on. I do want to make sure I get this in there. Okay, so people can find you online at motifskincare.com, right? Mm-hmm. And you have your first product is a cleanser. And I love what you said, the balance between getting the value and benefits of a mask, but having it be a rinse off. That's awesome. I think you also created a 15% off code for anyone listening. So Lindsay 15. Remember, it's Lindsay with an A. So use Lindsay 15 for 15% off. Motif Skincare, it's MOTIF Skincare, but this will all be in the show notes. Is there anywhere else, Devanshi, people can find you online?
Instagram.
Yeah. Instagram?
Yep.
Cool. Doing the Instagram game. All right. So we'll check you out. Instagram.
Great.
If you want to continue, to all the listeners here, if you want to continue to be the smartest person in the room, hit that subscribe button for next week's episode. As always, you can check out all the links and resources in the show notes, including links to Devanshi's brand and that 15% off code. That is all for this episode. Catch up with you next time. Thank you, Devanshi, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.